So because my fabric width was not as long as each of the panels that I'm adding the hem to, this is 44 inches wide and my panels are wider, I sewed 2 panels together. I simply joined them in the middle and did a nice seam so they're completely even and now twice as long, and I just give that a very good pressing after I've done that. And after I've joined these 2 pieces of fabric together and pressed them, I fold them lengthwise so I have a nice even hem all the way down the bottom and a raw edge all the way from one end to the other. And the raw edge is the edge that I'm going to use for the next step in the process. The next step is to run 2 long basting stitches. I usually set mine at a 5. I think that's 5 millimeter, all the way down the raw edges side of your folded piece of fabric, 2, and then you're going to gently pull them and gather them. In order to figure out how much to gather your hem, fold your curtain panel in half, just makes it easier to measure, then take the measurement of that width. Mine happens to be, I think, 29 inches wide. You're going to multiply that by 2, whatever your width is, and that's how much width to gather your hem. I have roughly gathered the hem that I'm adding to the panel. I already measured that, took that measurement of the width of the panel, and I'm matching that to the width of this hem, this gathered hem, and then I'll be ready to sew them together. And just continue to work those ruffles, the gathering along the 2 long basted stitches. And again, I basted mine at a setting of 5, a length of 5 millimeter stitch. That gives me plenty of wiggle room in terms of moving those ruffles along the edge so they're nice and even. And I'll continue to do that till I'm satisfied that it's very even, and then I'll join it to the bottom of the curtain panel. When you're ready to start attaching your ruffle to the curtain panel, there's an easy way to make sure it's even. So again, go back to folding the bottom of your curtain panel in half along the rough edge and mark the center. You can just do it by just finger pressing it, or you can use a pin if you want. So now I know where that halfway mark is, and I do the same thing with the ruffle. I fold it in half and find the center, and I mark it. This time I would probably put a pin, and then you start by pinning the center of this to the center of this, and then you divide the sections to another half and another half, and you get smaller and smaller and smaller so that the ruffles and the hem of the curtain panel match perfectly all the way across. I'll mention that in this particular project, I'm using what's called a French seam technique. And I have not made a video on how to do a French seam yet. So unfortunately, I can't demonstrate that to you, but there are dozens of videos out there that show how to do a French seam. The reason I've chosen to do this is that I want to make sure that both sides of my curtain look great, that they look good on the inside that I see. And they look good on the outside, the window side. So that's when the birdies fly up, they will say, good job, nice hemming, nicely done. But the way it works is instead of sewing right sides together, which is fairly typical in sewing, you start by adding the wrong sides together, and then you will enclose that hem back on the right sides. Sorry, not a perfect description. I recommend you go and look at some videos on how to do a French seam. If I ever do one, I'll add it to my channel. I find when I'm adding a gathered piece of fabric to a straight piece of fabric, it's helpful to use the little wonder clips, because you can manipulate the fabric really well and very easily. I do add pins once I'm happy with where everything lies, because the pins, approaching the pins with your feed dogs is easier than banging into these fellows, but these are very handy to start with. Okay, so now I have clipped and pinned the ruffle all the way along, and in this case I've done this wrong sides together because I'm putting these curtain panels together with a French seam, and now I'm going to stitch this at my machine. I'm satisfied that all my ruffles are evenly distributed. I took quite a bit of time doing that. In fact, I had to take it all out and go back and do it again, but it's worth doing, and it will give you a really good result at the end. I'll mention another thing. I made a mistake in an earlier description where I said find the middle of this ruffle by folding. No, in fact, because we sew two widths together, we have that seam, so that's the middle. And when I'm sewing this, I in fact start at the middle and sew outwards in both directions. That way, if I need to manipulate those ruffles a little bit more, I can do that. Okay, so I have sewn my ruffle onto the bottom of the curtain panel, and I have sewn this on wrong sides to wrong sides. And although that might sound quite counterintuitive to what you're used to, always sew right sides together, this is because I'm using this French seam technique. So now what I'm going to do after I gave it a good press is I'm going to trim all this excess fabric on the seam because I don't want that extra bulk, and then I am going to enclose it and sew another seam so that when the drape is hanging front ways, it looks good, and from the back it also looks good because all the raw edges of the seams are tucked inside. I just want to do a little plug for these outstanding scissors. These are by Guggenheim, and these were a gift to me from my brother who lives in the west coast of the US, and I use them all the time. They are superb. I highly recommend you get yourself a pair of Guggenheim shears. After trimming all that off, much less bulkier, much slimmer, and way easier to tuck into the next seam where everything gets tucked in. I'm nearing completion on this extending curtain panels in a whimsical and fun and not formal way. So I have got a beautifully finished edge on the outside and a really nicely finished edge on the inside as well. There's a little bit of sticky adhesive. These are commercial curtains from before, so I think a good wash will get rid of that. Very good pressing, lots of steam, and they're going to hang beautifully. You can see I've got one panel already hung in the back there, and I'm going to add this second guy, and I'm really pleased with how this has come together. This is all about reusing, sustainability, recycling, and just making it fun and whimsical, and find fabric that makes your heart sing. It's a really fun way of lengthening curtains. I hope you enjoyed that video.